So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. My name is Angie, and I'm the leader of the IONS group in Northern Virginia. It is a beautiful spring day here, just outside Washington, D.C. on April 28th, 2024, and I hope everything is well where you are. It's wonderful that you're joining us today. Before we introduce our wonderful guest, I just want to say a couple of quick things. And that is, we do invite questions. And if you'd like to ask a question and you're joining us online, please feel free to use the chat. And we will get to that. If you want to remain anonymous, you can use the chat. If you're online and would like to ask the question in real time, just raise your hand and we'll get to you. But just know that you'll be on the recording for time immemorial, basically. Those of you who are here, I have a lovely group of people who are actually joining in person. Please, I do encourage questions. If you don't want to come and talk in the mic, you can just write the question and hand it to me. If you'd like to ask the question yourself, then just let me know, raise your hand, let me know, and then I'll have you come up to the microphone and ask the question. So, all right, without further ado then, I'd like to turn it over to our guest today, Bruce Van Natta. I encountered Bruce a couple of years ago. I watched an interview of his and I was just bowled over by his story. And I thought I got to get him to talk to the group. It was just fascinating. It's a near-death experience of sorts, an out-of-body experience, but it was just the symbolism, just the experience you had in out-of-body, just how you came through it. It is so, I mean, they're all dramatic. All the near-death experiences are dramatic, but yours, I think, is one of the most sort of viscerally dramatic. I mean, there was so much going on, and then what you saw was just so extraordinary that I really wanted to have you come and talk to the group today. So we sent your flyer out. People know that you've had an extraordinary experience. So let's just have you launch into it and tell us in your own words. So welcome, Bruce.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to share. I think a lot of times, as we talked before the interview, a lot of times it's good to share, as you mentioned, maybe the pre-accident stuff, because people, I think when they hear my story, a lot of times get the preconceived notion or idea that I must have come from a really super spiritual family or background, and I didn't. When I share this testimony all the time with people, schools, prisons, jails, and a lot of times, again, I just like to share a little bit of background. So my family, my mom was a non-practicing Catholic. My dad was a non-practicing Lutheran. The only time we ever would go to church or anything like that would be Christmas, Easter. So I did not in any way, shape, or form grow up in church. I was taken to Sunday school one time as a child when I was babysit by my grandpa and grandma. And the only reason why I'm sharing this is because you can see how it comes into play later. It's pertinent. The Sunday school teacher took us in the basement, shared a story in the Bible where Jesus is in a place hugging and blessing children. And the disciples get mad and say, get the kids out of here, basically. Jesus has more important stuff to do than mess around with kids. Jesus rebukes his disciples, says, let the children come unto me. The Sunday school teacher had us, just a few kids around a very small rural church, had us around this table, broken basket, coloring this picture, black and white picture being colored in with crayons of a bearded guy hugging kids. He tells a story, and then he went too far, as a lot of Christians do, and he made the statement something along the lines of that the story proves that Jesus loves children, and that if, loves children, he protects children. At that time in my life, I had been being repeatedly molested by some babysitters for about a year and a half. And when the man said that Jesus is real and that he protects children, it made me immediately quit coloring and push it away and think that it's a made-up story like Santa Claus. I knew Santa Claus wasn't real. I was the kid in kindergarten and first grade telling the other kids that that's a lie, and I wasn't getting any presents. And so I was the one telling the other kids Santa Claus isn't real. So anyway, the guy made the statement, Jesus protects kids, and I said, oh, it's a Santa Claus story, and I pushed it away. And several months went by. A super bad night was happening in my life. I don't know, 6, 7, 8 months later, something like that. And literally in desperation, with what they say, doubting Thomas type thing, I said, called out as a 5.5-year-old child, laying on top of the bed. And I said, Jesus, if you're real, prove it. come and hug me like he did the kids in the story. And I can tell you that I was immediately picked up off the bed. I was given a physical hug. There was nobody else in the room. And more than just a physical hug, it felt like being dipped in liquid love from the top of my head, the soles of my feet. So for me, I woke up the next morning replaying what had happened. And I knew that I knew that I knew when I said, Jesus, if you're real, hug me, that I had gotten a hug and that I felt love that I've never felt in my life before. So I'd like to say that I told people about it or that I was a good kid or anything like that, but I didn't. I wasn't telling anybody. I kept it as a secret. So again, because of the dysfunction in our home, I grew up in an abusive family. They're very dysfunctional, drug and alcohol family. And I turned a lot of things in my life trying to make the pain go away from childhood. And as I just went through thing after thing as I got older, ended up getting married, went up having kids, my dad was a over-the-road truck driver, but he had gotten too many drunk driving tickets. So then he ended up starting a repair facility, a diesel repair shop behind our house. And so I grew up working in my dad's diesel repair garage behind our house. And that's how I started in that business. And that's exactly how the accident happened, was a work-related accident on a diesel truck. So we had lived in southern Wisconsin, where we're from. My wife and I are from southern Wisconsin. We lived down there. I ran a large business for somebody else doing the same type stuff. We ended up moving back home around 2003, where we're from, this area. We bought this 40 acres, built the house in the middle of the 40 acres. I took $100,000 of tooling and put that on a service truck, put together a service truck, and I did on-site diesel repair. And so I traveled. We live right in the just about dead center, exact middle of the state. And so I traveled around the state of Wisconsin doing on-site diesel repair. There's all kinds of diesel equipment that can't come to a shop. It has to get taken in by somebody has to go work on it on site instead of going to a shop. So for instance, I might be working on a diesel generator at a hospital. I might be working on a piece of diesel construction equipment on a construction site or a gravel pit or a farmer's field, diesel engine using to pump the water. So that's the kind of stuff I did. The accident happened November 16th, 2006. It was a 3-day job. I'd worked on it Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And again, I was working an hour south of our home. So I'd leave in the morning at 6 a.m., show up at the job site 7 a.m. And so again, we worked on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It was the garage that we're working in was a big rectangular shaped implement garage at this logging facility. And the Peterbilt logging truck was backed up into the back of the garage. Me and this other guy, Leonard was his name, the other mechanic, he worked on site for that logging company. It was actually his daughter and son-in-law owned it. I had known Leonard since I was very young. He used to own his own logging business. And when I was very young, he used to bring his stuff, his trucks, logging equipment to my dad's shop to get work done. So that's how I knew the man. So at this point, we've worked on it 3 days. In order to test the repair, we took the engine apart and replaced the cylinder head gasket, was the technical thing that we actually did. And in order to test that repair, it was leaking coolant. In order to test it, I told Leonard to start up the engine and we're going to run it up to temperature or try and get it as warm as we could inside a garage. So while the truck is running, I'm wiping my tools off, putting them back inside my truck. And I just had last couple tools left to put away. Literally, I was 5 minutes from leaving. And Leonard came up, tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, "Hey, before you go, could you look at one more thing? I've got a dirty spot in the front of the engine." He said, "I wipe it off and it comes back within, a short period of time." So he knew he had some type of oil seep, some kind of oil leak. And so I didn't answer him. I looked up at the clock on the wall in the shop. I was looking at it and I was thinking about it. I remember it was 6:10 p.m. I left my house, like I said, 6 a.m., gotten on site at 7 a.m. So I knew I was already over a 13-hour day. If I walked out the door right then, it's going to be, 13-hour plus day. And now he wants me to do something else. I was tired. I didn't want to. I'm looking at the clock and he said, "No, look, you don't have to fix it." He said, "Just diagnose it. Just figure out where the oil is seeping out of." He said, "Maybe it'll be something simple. You can tell me what to fix, what to do. I can do it myself. Maybe you have to order parts. I'll schedule it to come back, then fix it at a later time." So For anybody listening, watching today, if you were to look underneath from the front, looking from the front towards the back, if you were to look underneath one of these large Class 8 trucks, these are the biggest semi trucks that you're going to see anywhere on the road. If you were to look from the front to the back, what you'd see is there's that space underneath the front bumper. Old trucks had chrome bumpers. These newer trucks a lot of times have plastic, white and black plastic bumpers. But either way, there's that bit of space between the bottom bumper and the ground. And if you were to get on your knees and look from the front of the truck towards the back, what you'd see is the lowest thing to the ground on these trucks is the front axle. And when you turn your steering wheel in the truck, it's the axle where your steering axle where your wheels are moving in the front to steer the truck. Well, there's a big steel I-beam that goes from the left side to the right side of that truck. That on this particular truck, it carried 5 to 6 tons of weight, so 10 to 12,000 pounds of weight on the 2 front tires. Leonard, the other mechanic, had placed a bottle jack, just a round jack, underneath the passenger side front axle. He had jacked it up in order to remove the front passenger side wheel. Unfortunately, jacks are lifting devices. They're not made to hold weight. So he had jacked it up and not let the weight back off and put it on a jack stand or block him any type. It was just the weight was the front of the truck was being held up by this jack underneath the passenger side. So I looked underneath the truck. I had to go underneath the front to look at this dirty spot. I looked under the truck. I saw that this axle, again, these axles are, maybe 6-8 inches deep front to back, maybe 6 to 8 inches tall, and just a big steel I-beam going from one side to the other. And I looked at it was being held up by a jack, and it wasn't on jack stands. And I decided, it's been on the jack for 3 days. It's been running 15 or 20 minutes. I'll just go underneath it. There's a tool that mechanics use to go underneath vehicles called a creeper. And the thing with tools, especially for people that work with tools for a living as I did, there are, cheap tools that do a really bad job. And then there are expensive tools that do the job correctly. Cheap tools, I say all the time, have cost a lot of swear words to be said. They're very aggravating. They don't often work right. And this creeper, this mechanic, Leonard's creeper that he had gone underneath the vehicle with, was a real piece of junk. It was plastic. It was hollow core. It had little bitty small wheels. The problem is every garage floor has cracks, gravel, sand. You try to roll across it with these little small wheeled creepers or, do it yourself home style creepers. And again, it's just very aggravating. I looked in the back of my truck. Here's my very expensive creeper, 6 great big wheels on it. And I didn't want to take the time to unstrap it and get it out of my truck and get it underneath the vehicle. So I got on his plastic hollow core creeper, which is literally it was the difference between being chopped in half versus being just crushed in half. So I got on his plastic hollow core creeper. I'm laying on my back. I go underneath the front bumper, feet first, if you can imagine that. So I'm going underneath that front bumper. I go underneath the truck, and where I stop the axle that's going from the one side to the other, that has the 10 to 12,000 pounds of weight on it, being held up by a jack on my left side or the passenger side as I'm laying under the truck, where I stop to look at the bottom of the engine that's still running for the dirty spot. It just so happened that axle, which again is 6-8 inches, whatever it is, front to back, where I stopped, that was just an inch or two above my belly button, above the soft part of my belly. So basically from the bottom of my ribs to my pelvic bone, that soft area of your body, that's where that axle was going from left to right across. And I'm laying underneath it when it's just a couple inches above me, being held up by a jack on the left side, and the wheel is still attached on the right side. So I'm looking at the bottom of the engine. I diagnosed where I thought it was coming from. I yelled at Leonard to go ahead and shut the engine off. I didn't need it running anymore. So he crawled up inside the truck. It was a Peterbilt. That's the brand, like Ford, Chevy. It's a Peterbilt truck, and with a Caterpillar diesel engine, big yellow engine, conventional. So it has a long nose. It's got a hood that's open, and I'm laying directly in line with the engine, in line with the truck, looking at the bottom. Peterbilts are known for air suspension. So when he got in the truck, the truck shifted because of the air suspension, which is normal. He's a tall man, 6'1", 6'2", whatever. So he gets inside the truck, and apparently he had grabbed the steering wheel to pull himself in or whatever. And when he did, that driver's side wheel is still on the ground, attached to the axle that's being held up by a jack on the passenger side, directly above the midsection of my body. I'm looking up at the truck. He gets in and the whole thing shifts and rocks as it normally would. But I saw movement in the peripheral vision of my left eye over here. And I turned my head just in time to see the jacket slipped out, and it was teetering right on the very, very edge of the axle, just teetering there. And before I could think, blink, or do anything, the jack shot out like a rocket, and 10 to 12,000 pounds of steel crashed to the cement. So if you can imagine, 5 to 6 tons of steel hitting cement, it sounded like a bomb went off, this crazy loud explosion noise. But the strange thing for me was I heard liquid. It was a swirling, swishing liquid noise. I don't know how to explain it other than that, but with this big loud explosion of the steel hitting the cement, this swirling liquid. Well, come to find out, I was the liquid. When the truck fell through the middle of my body and hit the cement, I'm not going to stop it. And I said, the plastic hollow core creeper was literally the difference between life and death. When it fell through the middle of me, right from between the bottom of my ribs and my pelvic, right through there. It clipped a couple ribs on the left side, but it fell through. And on impact, when it fell through me, blood shot out of my mouth. When it hit me, it instantly blood shot out at the same time. On impact, blood shot out, and a big blob of blood was on the cement right next to my head. And I looked at the blood, and the realization hit me of what had just happened. And right then, I just said, "Lord, help me." And that's why I referenced what happened as a child. When I say Lord, I was talking to Jesus. So I said it again a second time, the same one that I had as a 5-year-old kid had said, "Jesus, for real, come and hug me." So I just said, "Lord, help me." I said it a second time. And that's when I looked down and I could see the plastic hollow core creeper had collapsed to nothing. I mean, it was literally like, however thick, very, very thin. And on the left side of my body here, the axle's touching the cement here, coming up at an angle because the driver's side wheel's still on. On the left side of my body, there was approximately an inch of space between the bottom of the axle and the cement. So I know that my body is literally approximately an inch thick on the left side. And look to the right side, and maybe it was a couple inches thick. So maybe there's some skeptical people that might watch this. I'm a skeptic. I think it's actually funny that this happened to me because I'm usually the biggest skeptic in the room. When the truck fell, we found out later I was actually thinner than my spine. L4, L5 vertebra. I don't have a belly button anymore, but straight from back where I used to have a belly button to my back where it fell on me. According to the radiology reports, the L4, L5 vertebrae were spider cracked and D-shaped. So I was thinner than my spine. It just enough to make it a D-shaped, those two vertebrae. So again, if you could picture your body being a little bit thinner than your spine in the middle, a lot thinner on the left, and maybe just a little bit thicker on the right, approximately. So all the way across, it's got me. And I can't even tell you how bad the pain was. It was off the charts pain. The guy got out of Leonard, the other mechanic got down out of the truck, and he looked, the bumper is back here behind my head, and now the bumper is on the ground on the passenger side. The passenger side fuel tank is caved in from the bottom because that whole side of the truck had dropped, but because the wheel is still on the driver's side, it was still up. And so there's a space between the bottom of the bumper and the ground. And so I'm looking back out from underneath the truck because I was just underneath the front bumper. I'm looking back out from underneath it, and Leonard had gotten down out of the truck, and he's looking at me from underneath the bumper, and our eyes are locked. We're just a couple feet or whatever, foot and a half apart, and we're staring at each other. And he went into shock. We could only see the top of my body from ribs up because the axle is so tall this way. When it fell through my body, again, all I could literally see was from my ribs up. And I couldn't see the lower half of my body because that axle was there blocking that view. So that's the same thing he's looking at. And he went into shock immediately. I remember his eyes got huge and he froze. And I'm looking at him and he's looking at me, and he wasn't doing anything. And I couldn't talk very well at all, but I was trying to say, call 911. I kept saying it, call 911, please call 911. And he wasn't budging. He didn't move. And it was terrifying me because I was in a lot of pain and just the horror of the whole situation. And he's not helping me. He's not doing anything. He's just staring. And the eyes were, again, I'd known him since I was very young. And the eyes were guilt because he had jacked it up and not used the safety equipment. And he just again, people go into shock when they see things sometimes, and he was just frozen. And I just kept saying over and over, please call 911, please call 911. And finally he shook out of it. He, again, this goes back to 2006. So he it's an area where, as you'd imagine, a volunteer fire department. So it's very rural. Um, so he calls 911. At that point, they had pagers that are going off, and wherever these volunteer fire department people are at. So the pagers go off. He calls 911. I hear him say something like, a truck fell on a guy, he's crushed in half. You got to send people. So he gets off the phone and he decides he's going to try and get the truck off of me because we're in a remote location. He doesn't know when the people are going to come. So he goes and gets the jack that had slipped out when the truck fell on me. And I'm begging him to shut the engine off because he never did shut the engine off. The jack had slipped before he shut the engine off. So the engine is just right above me. It's not touching me, but it's literally just, not very far above me. But the problem was big diesel engines vibrate, and inherently that's the way they're made. And so because the axle had fallen through the middle of my body and had me crushed down, pinned to the cement, and that plastic helical creeper had flattened out. The creeper that I had in my truck, right there in that middle, it's got a steel framework and there's an extra set of wheels. And the thickness of the cross member, the steel framework of my creeper was approximately the thickness of the gap between the bottom of the axle and the cement. So if I had been on my snap-on creeper, when the truck fell on me, that creeper framework would have been a pinch point, and I would have been sheared into two pieces instead of being crushed to an inch thick on one side and 2 inch thick on the other side, the full width across my belly. So again, it's vibrating on me. It's hurting like crazy. The vibration is exaggerating because it's on my vertebrae that are broken, and it's just, vibrating on me. And I'm saying, shut it off, shut it off, shut it off, shut it off. So finally he got back inside the truck. He shut the engine off. He's looking for a place to put the jack underneath the truck to get it back off of me. But the problem is, because the axle, he had that jack underneath the axle's now on the cement. So there's no way to get the jack underneath it because it's on the cement. So he's trying to find another spot that he can get it off my body. So if you were to look at the side view of one of these big trucks, the wheel is off. And if you're looking right directly at the side view, driver's side or passenger side, there's a big curved leaf spring that attaches at the frame, goes down, connects to the axle, it goes side to side, comes back up and touches the frame again. And the frame rail just goes across. And these big curved leaf springs on each side, arched springs, are the suspension for the truck. So it's connected to the axle. So he put the jack over on my left side as I'm laying at the truck, which would be the passenger side of the truck. Over there, the wheel is off, and that's why it's on the ground. He slipped the jack underneath the curve of that leaf spring, because the leaf spring is attached to the axle, and he thought if he could jack up there, it's going to raise the whole truck, which it would. The problem is, you don't want to ever jack something up on a curve. You want to jack something up on a flat so it doesn't slip. So I was begging him, don't jack it up there, because it already hurt bad enough. I didn't want to get crushed a second time. And I was begging him, please don't jack it up there. It's just going to fall on me again. And he ignored me, and he just kept saying, I don't have any other place. There is no other place. He wouldn't listen to me. I kept saying, please don't jack it there. And he said, there's no other place. So there's a little handle, and you just have to, each pump, it goes up a little bit. And I was watching, and I could see the jack just slipping as he's trying to jack it up. It's going up, but it's just slipping up the arc of the leaf spring, exactly as I thought it would. And finally it caught an edge of a piece of steel. So just the top of this 20-ton bottle jack is like a silver dollar size, and it caught the edge of a piece of steel on that spring. And now it started going up, and every pump it's going up, it's going up, it's going up. So as he's jacking it up, it's going up. But as I'm looking over the side, I can see that the jack is just barely caught on the edge of that steel. I'm thinking it's going to slip out again. So he's jacking it up, and finally he gets it up off of my body. When Leonard got the truck up off of my body, now I can see my body for the first time, top to bottom. And so I had a work uniform that had the name of my company on it, Bruce's Mobile Service, one patch here, some pockets. And right at the bottom of the pockets, right there, my work uniform went straight back, and it followed along my spine, and then it came back up on my pelvic. So literally I had this flat spot across the middle that was, again, approximately an inch. My body, the flat middle part of my belly, was approximately an inch thick on the left and maybe a couple inches thick on the right. And once I could see my body top to bottom and I saw that flat spot, there was nothing in reality. There was nothing I had ever seen, nothing I could compare it to. I had no frame of reference for that injury. And as crazy as it sounds to people, my brain is seeking, scanning, trying to come up with something to make sense of it with. And the only thing that I immediately thought of was, as crazy as it sounds, cartoons from when I was a child of Wile E. Coyote gets run over by Acme truck and he has a flat spot, or the rock lands on him and he's flat like a pancake. And I'm literally looking at my body and I thought to myself, it's cartoonish. This looks cartoonish. And there's no way anybody could live. There's no way anybody could live with a flat spot like this. And I'm thinking everything is wrecked. I mean, there's no way I'm going to live. And so this fear, this horrible fear and I've already got this crazy amount of pain, but this horrible fear that I'm not going to live. And so I'm in shock, obviously. I'm panicking. I wanted him to get me out front of the truck. And so I began to say, please drag me out from the truck, get me out. The creeper is flattened out, crushed in the middle, as my body is, but it's still the little wheels are on each end. And I'm begging him to get me out from the truck because I'm afraid the jack's going to slip and it's going to fall on me again. And he wouldn't do it. Most people have been told you don't want to move somebody with a back injury. And obviously I'm flat across the middle, so he knew I had to have a back injury. So he wouldn't do it. He said, I've called 911. They're coming, they'll help you. And I said, please, Leonard, get me out. And he wouldn't do it. So in a panic, I reached back and I grabbed the bottom of the bumper, which is just back behind my head. And I was able to drag my body out. So now my shoulders and my arms are now out from underneath the truck. And I looked and I could see that the axle is now over the top of my legs. So I know that if the jack slips this time, it's going to break my legs. And so I thought, okay, all I got to do is do one more push. So I dragged myself out this far. If I can just do one more push, I'll get out far enough where if it slips, if it falls, it'll miss me. So I tried to do that second push. And that's, a couple things. As soon as he jacked the truck up off of my body, I had a horrible pain, but as soon as he dragged the truck off my body, even before I dragged myself out that little bit, I had this incredible weakness. I don't even know how to say it, but just an incredible weakness take over my body. The doctors told us later, I spent a year in the hospital, but during that period of time after they took me out of coma and all the stuff, but at some point asking doctors questions and just talking to them, the reason why they said I felt that incredible weakness was because I had 5 places that major arteries were completely severed. And so as soon as he took the truck off me, I was internally bleeding out. Doctors have told me that if you have one major artery completely severed, they told me it's 8 to 10 minutes. You could put no tourniquet on or something, 8 to 10 minutes before you completely bleed out. But I had 5 places that the arteries were severed. And so as soon as he took it off my body, I'm bleeding out internally right there. So as I'm bleeding out, I'm feeling that weakness. That's why I was just feeling that horrible weakness. So I dragged myself out. I tried to do the second push, and my body was shaking so I can't even describe it. But I fixated, for whatever reason, I remember fixating on my right bicep, my right arm. And at that time in my life, from working heavy equipment stuff for all those years, I used to have a lot of upper body strength and muscles. And, I was watching my arm just shake like uncontrollably is the only way I could describe it. Uncontrollably, just shaking up and down. My muscle just shaking. And I couldn't do that push. And I knew in my brain, I was somebody at that point, I could have done 25 pull-ups easily. And I couldn't even do this partial bit of weight, and my body was shaking. And that was scaring me. And then it was right then that I realized I couldn't breathe. My lungs had been collapsed. My diaphragm was pushed up. It had collapsed my lungs. Again, I clipped a couple ribs over here. And the only thing I could compare it to is I've been in hospitals where they take the breathing machine off of somebody that's in a spot where they're brain dead or whatever. And they take the breathing machine off, and it's really ugly because the body continues to try to breathe and suck in for a period of time, and it can last hours. And I've been there and I've watched that happen. And that's the only thing that reminds me, because I was trying to take in a breath and I couldn't. It was just that horrible feeling of wanting to breathe, but not being able to get that breath. And as I was doing that, and I'm thinking, I can't take the next breath. And my body was shaking uncontrollably. And I'm trying to get that next breath. at that point, for whatever reason, because my pulse is so elevated from being in shock, my heart is just racing. And I was literally, you know how it is when sometimes you're being physically active, whatever you're doing, jogging, running, whatever, and you can sometimes hear your pulse in your ear. I mean, I don't know why sometimes we can actually hear our heart pounding. For whatever reason, at that point, I'm listening and my heart just racing. Bup, 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 bup. And I'm trying to catch that next breath. I can't. And I can say this. I literally heard my heart stop. It was just like shutting off the engine. Bup, 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 bup. And on the last beat, the last thump of my heart, my spirit left my body and I went up into the roof of the garage, 14, 15, 16 feet, whatever, inside the garage, inside the building, but all the way to the top of the roof of the ceiling. So I'm all the way in the ceiling, 14, 15, 16 feet, whatever it was, looking down on the accident scene. And first thing I could tell you is I went from having this horrible pain and the fear in the ceiling. I was in perfect peace. I've never had peace like that in my entire life. I don't have words to describe it, but I know I want it again, and I'm looking forward to it. So I was up there in perfect peace, looking down the accident scene, and I was so completely removed from the accident scene that I didn't even know that I was the guy underneath the truck. I was just like watching a movie, and sometimes I make this corny dad joke, and I say, it's like when a guy watches a chick flick and they're not into it at all. They're just watching it because they have to. And maybe their wife is sitting there crying or whatever because some emotional moment, but the guy is just unattached. And that's the only way I can describe. I was watching the accident scene unattached is the only way. I don't know how to say it. I was unattached. I was just watching it in perfect peace. I say it all the time. I was having a party by myself in the ceiling. It's the best I've ever felt. And so I'm just up there enjoying perfect peace, looking down an accident scene. So the volunteer fire department has been showing up, onesie, twosies. I'm listening to their conversation. And it was really weird because normally in real life, you couldn't listen to everybody's conversation at once and make sense, but I could. I was in the scene listening to the different conversations all at the same time. And it's hard to describe, but I was listening and watching, and I could make sense of what they were saying all at the same time, just watching. And they're all standing around. And because I had a massive chest injury, so I quit breathing. My heart stops. They're there when it happened. They were already there when it happened. In fact, the first two guys got there. And when the first two guys got there, it was right before my heart stopped. And they were trying to help me breathe. The first two guys, they were trying to help me breathe, and they didn't pull me out. I was just, this much was sticking out, and I was trying to do the push, and my arm was shaking. And those first two guys got there when my heart stopped and I left. So because I have this massive chest injury, they're not going to do CPR. So they all just stood back. People keep coming as they're showing up, volunteer fire department. And I'm just listening from above to all their conversations. So they had called med flight because they knew by the injury, I'm in a very remote area, and they knew by the injury, there's no little, podunk hospital that's going to be able to do anything for me. So they called med flight from our state's biggest trauma center. And so the problem was they forgot to call an ambulance. While I was in the air up in the ceiling listening, all the way back in the corner, I was listening to two of the guys talking about from the volunteer fire department how they're going to get sued. I was listening to that conversation. We're going to get sued because we didn't call an ambulance. Helicopter comes, helicopter goes back to Madison because they can't get the body now from the scene of there to where the highway to where the helicopter's going in. So they send it back. Then they call an ambulance from another small town, the closest small town. It's like 20 minutes, half an hour away, to come and get me. So the whole time I'm up above, I'm listening to all the conversations. I'm watching from above. And they're all just, again, standing around talking quietly, respectfully. And I'm just watching from above. And Leonard, the guy that I've been working with, who I knew since I was a child, he's on his knees above me, just, again, this much of me sticking out. And right dead center in the middle of the truck. Now you can imagine the hood is shut. So there's the big bumper and there's the grill right there and the headlights there. And he's right there with just the top half of me sticking out from that front bumper. And he's on his knees and he's running, patting me on the head, running his fingers through my hair. And he's crying. And I'm listening to every word he's saying from above. He's saying stuff like, I should be the one that's dead, not you, because he had jacked it up and not used safety equipment. And because he'd known my family and me since I was young, he was saying, I should be the one that's dead, not you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And he was just crying. And I was up there. And again, it was I was unattached. I didn't care that he was crying. It didn't make me sad. I was in perfect peace. It didn't bother me. I was just watching, watching. I don't know, just observing. And so I'm up there just observing. I'm listening to everybody talk. And here's a cool thing. And this is for me. I mean, I'm a skeptic. So if I heard this story, if I heard this testimony, whatever you want to call it, this is something that's big. I'm watching, and the last two people, there's 8 people in the room. I could count them, boop, 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 around the front. The last 2 people that came from the volunteer fire department was a lady, a red-haired lady, the only woman, and the only gray-haired guy. And they came in the back door, all the way in the back corner of the shop. So if you could imagine this, in this garage, that Peterbilt logging truck is backed up to the back of the shop. My service truck with all my tools are backed up to it. My truck just a big rolling toolbox. And everybody had come in from behind me where the blacktop driveway goes out to the road to the shop. They had all, all the people had come, and they had, from above, I watched them. They all come in the front door, the main door of the shop. And just like I had for the 3 days with my truck in and out through the main front door. But the last 2 people to come came in the wrong door. They came in the back, the red-haired lady and the gray-haired guy. And I'm just going to stop and jump ahead. But when I got out of the hospital a year later, it was actually over a year later, I wanted to go to the volunteer fire department and tell them thank you. So I call, they have a monthly meeting. The guy says, yeah, the head guy says, yeah, I'm going to put you in a room off to the side. You come early and it'll be a surprise. And I'll have you walk out. So they start their meeting. He calls me out of the room. I come out. There was approximately 30 people in the room. And this is over just a little over a year later. I went around the room of, approximately 30 people. And I pointed out 8 of the 10 people who had come to the scene of the accident a year before. I pointed them out. You were there, you were there, you were there. And it was really easy with the redhead, Shannon, and the gray-haired guy, because it was the only woman and the only guy with gray hair. My wife teases me. She says, I'm the guy with gray hair now. But anyway, so they came up the driver's side of the truck. And so I asked them a year later, and I said, why did you come in the wrong door? Everybody else came in the front. You came in the back. Because it had been a year, they couldn't even remember it first. They're like, what? I said, you came in the back door in the back right corner from where my point of view up in the ceiling. Everybody else came in the front, the main entrance. Why did you come in the back? They thought about it. It's like, oh, then they remembered they'd come together. They said, yeah, we drove by, missed the driveway, saw the flashing lights of all the emergency vehicles, and realized there was a secondary gravel driveway, not the main blacktop entrance, but there was a secondary gravel driveway just past it. And they followed that because they realized it angled up to the back of the shop. And that's why they came in the back door. So for me, again, at this point, no heartbeat based on the first responders, the volunteer fire department, no heartbeat, no pulse, 5, 6, 8 minutes, whatever. And this lady and this guy come in the wrong door, and I'm able to tell them a year later what door they came in. For me, that's proof that the real Bruce that couldn't even see laying at the truck, the doors, the real Bruce was actually up on the ceiling, not my carcass underneath the truck. So I'm watching from above. She comes to the wrong door. And here's a weird thing. I didn't realize it, but colors were brighter. So she seemed like she had glowing red hair. When I met her in person, I was disappointed with her hair. And I said, did you change your hair color or what, like a year later? And she said, no, this is my hair color. And I said, but I saw from above and your hair looked like so bright red. And she said, nope, this is the color of my hair. And it puzzled me. And then when I spoke at the volunteer fire department that night, I said, I remember at a certain point, you guys put this bright yellow board underneath me to stabilize my back, I guess. And I said, this bright yellow board. And they said, no, we don't have a bright yellow board. It's like beige. And I said, no, I saw it. It was yellow. So then they went and got it. They had it. And they took it out and they showed it to me. And it was like I don't know. It wasn't bright yellow. It wasn't what I had in my memory of being this bright yellow color. In fact, it was like a beige, a muted yellow. Anyway, so I'm watching from above. The lady comes in. And so it was strange because as I was watching from above, I was really focused on Leonard before she got there. I was really focused on Leonard and what he was saying about crying and apologizing and stuff. And so he's on his knees. You can picture it. And the front of the truck is there. And on each side of him was an angel about 8 feet tall. And I'm only saying they're 8 feet tall because Leonard is a little over 6 feet tall. He's on his knees and they were on each side of him, but their heads were approximately 2 feet taller than his head. So that would have made them, I'm again guesstimating, 8 feet tall. So I just instinctively knew. People say, how do you know they're angels? I just knew that I knew that I knew they're angels. I don't know how. I knew they were angels. They were white shining robes. Their robes were emanating light. So I called out to Jesus, right? I said, Lord, help me. So I've read through the Bible and I looked up every time that angels are mentioned in the Bible. They're mentioned 290 sometimes. And sometimes they look like normal people. Sometimes they don't in the Bible. Sometimes they have wings. Sometimes they don't. And when I looked from above, there was these two, again, approximately 8 feet tall men based off of Leonard in white shining robes, very, very muscular, big, broad shoulders. They had a belt on their robe. They had really long hair. Their hair went all the way down to where their belt was. They looked like matching twins. They were identical in appearance, shape, size, everything. They never talked. I never heard them say a word. I never got to see their face because they were leaned over and I'm looking from above and I could see their back. And the one from the driver's side reaches over and he puts his hand in the middle of the flat spot. And the one from the passenger side does the same thing. And from above, I just like, oh, those angels are down there to help that guy. And it seemed strangely, when I think about it in retrospect, it seemed very normal, very natural. It didn't even seem like a big deal to me in the ceiling. I'm just like nonchalantly, oh, those angels are down there to help that guy. I don't know. I think I've contemplated that over and over. And the only thing I could think of is that angels are normal in the spirit realm. And that's why it seemed normal to me when I was in the spirit realm. So I'm watching now and I could see the angels touching. I'm like, oh, those angels are down there to help that guy. And again, I could care less. I didn't know it was me. Leonard is still crying. So he's there. The angels on each side of him and they're not moving. They just got their hands in the middle. And that's when Shannon and the other guy walked in. She comes around the front of the truck. She moved Leonard out of the way. She and this other guy, the last two people to get there. Everybody else had been there. They're all standing around. They've now, they called the ambulance now. The helicopter is coming back the second time. So she's feeling for a pulse. And I remember as I watched from above, on the left corner of the truck or the passenger side front corner was one of the guys from the volunteer front was a big guy. And he was wearing what I call farmer bibs, those light colored bibs with the blue stripes. He had his arms crossed and there was a smaller guy next to him as I was looking down. And he told Shannon, the lady who just got there, and, she's now between the angels. She's now over the body and she's feeling for a pulse. And I remember him saying to her, it's too late. He's already passed. And he said it to her multiple times and she just ignored him. And she's just frantically feeling for a pulse and there's nothing there. And she's, I'm just watching her do that. And he told her a couple times it's too late. And then she said, what's his name? And Leonard says, Bruce Van Natta. And this lady, who I'd never met, complete stranger to me, starts slapping that guy in the face down there like this. And she starts calling out and saying, Bruce Van Natta, come back. And she just kept getting louder and louder. And as I'm watching from the front, the top, which is kind of the front of the garage looking down, all the people that have been talking, respectfully hanging around talking, not really doing anything, because there was nothing they could do, they all stopped talking and they all turned their head and looked at her like, what are you doing? Crazy lady, what are you doing? And she just kept getting louder, louder. Nobody's talking now. It's just her. And she just keeps getting louder. Like, Bruce trying to come back. And I guess silly as this sounds, when she'd say Bruce Van Natta, it's somewhat kind of a little bit sounded familiar. I wouldn't have said it was my name. I wouldn't have said it was me. I don't know. It's so strange. It just seemed familiar. It's the only way I can say it. So my spirit started creeping down out of the ceiling. And it seems like when I got about halfway, it went really fast. And my spirit came into my body really fast. It came in through the top. And when it went into my body, Shannon's been interviewed multiple times. And I think it was Discovery Channel, either that or Country Music Television, one of them, that when they interviewed her, she said how my eyes were completely shut. No heartbeat, no pulse, eyes are completely shut. But when my spirit came back in, for me, my spirit goes back in, my heart miraculously starts. No CPR, no medicine, no nothing. I've had no heartbeat, no pulse for minutes. Again, depending on which person you believe, which person because everybody had a different amount of time, 6, 8, 10 minutes, whatever it is. No heartbeat, no pulse. My spirit comes back in. When it comes back in, my eyes pop open, and it instantly came back to me that the truck fell on me. I'm the gun of the truck. And I just said, oh, a 4-letter swear word that means fertilizer. And I remember the pain was just so outrageous. And I just said, I don't want this. I don't want this. Hurts too bad. I don't want it. No, it hurts. I can't stand it. That was so good. I don't want this. And as quick as I said, I don't want this, my heart stopped. My spirit left my body. It went right back up on the roof of the garage. And now I know as I'm looking down that it's me. So I'm looking down. The angels are there. The lady's there. I could see it all. But this time, right, right here, right next to me, a tunnel opened up going out of the roof of the garage, going up like a 45-degree angle. There's a bright light on the end of the tunnel. And I knew that I knew that I knew that I knew that it was a tunnel to heaven, and Jesus was on the end of the tunnel. And I got in the tunnel very excited, happy to go to heaven, happy to go away. And so I started rocketing away in the tunnel. I left the garage and I started going towards the bright light, and I was excited. And I know this doesn't make sense, but I could feel, I was in the spirit, so I shouldn't have been able to feel like G-force, I wouldn't think, but that's what I felt. I felt G-force like in a fast car. I like fast cars. I like fast motorcycles. I raced motorcycles for years. I enjoy that feeling. And I was like, yeehaw, this is great. So I'm going away towards the bright light, excited, happy to go to heaven in this awesome peace. And as I'm going away, it felt like I say every time, halfway. It felt like I was about halfway there. And somewhere behind me, I could hear it. Bruce Van Natta, come back, come back, come back. And I stopped. I got sucked backwards out of the tunnel. I'm looking down from above. I'm back in the garage. The tunnel is still there. And when I got sucked backwards, I didn't want to go back. So I was looking the way I wanted to go. And so I got pulled backwards. And now I'm back in the roof of the garage. I can still see the tunnel to my right here. I look down. I see the lady. I see the angels. I see everything. People are frantic. They don't know what to do. They're freaking out because of just the way everything was going. And my spirit comes back into my body. And when it come back into my body the second time, again, horrendous pain. So I go from feeling the best I've ever felt in my life to the worst I've ever felt in my life. And I remember the angels, and I looked on my left and I looked on my right for the angels. And it really scared me because I couldn't see them. They weren't there. And I'm looking, but there's nothing there. And I'm thinking, where did they go? I really need them because it hurts so bad and this isn't good. And, it just the fear, the pain, all the craziness. And it was in that craziness of the fear and the pain and all that commotion, because they went from standing around talking to when I come back and my heart starts, they're just running around. And in all that commotion, right then I heard the whisper of God. I know that I know that I know it was God, the Holy Spirit. The Bible says the Holy Spirit lives inside of Christians. And the whisper very calmly said, if you want to live, you're going to have to fight, and it's going to be a hard fight. I didn't know that meant I was going to have to spend the next year in the hospital. I didn't know that meant I'd have to learn to walk again, learn to read again, learn to write again, all the stuff that I had to go through. But God did. And he didn't lie to me. He just said, if you want to live, you have to fight. It's going to be a hard fight. And I remember my exact thought, screw it. I don't want to fight. It hurts too bad. I'm out of here. And again, my heart stopped. My spirit left. I went back up in the garage, roof, ceiling. The tunnel opened up again. And I knew where I wanted to go. And I started going away towards the bright light in the tunnel. I was going away. Again, I felt like I got about halfway there. Again, I could hear this. Bruce and I to come back, come back, come back. My spirit came back out of the tunnel. I'm back up on the roof of the garage looking down. This time I know it's me. And the angels were there again. I could see them clearly again. Just leaned over, not moving, just touching the middle in the flat spot. And so my spirit comes back into my body. Again, the horrible pain. She says when she's been interviewed that the first 2 times my eyes completely closed. And when my heart would start, my eyes would pop open. And she said the last time, she said your eyes didn't close all the way. They only closed like halfway. And she said they were like, your eyelids were like halfway and there was no movement in your eyes at all. But then when it popped in, when your spirit came in, your heart started that third time, they just opened that little bit and your eyes were moving again. And so Shannon, who I thought had bright red hair, was right here next to me. Her face was right here when I came in that time. And she says to me, Mister, you're on the verge of life and death. What do you have? Mister, you're on the verge of life and death. And I remember when she said that, I was thinking, lady, you have no idea what she was saying, because I really am leaving this place. I'm up in the ceiling. The real me's been on the ceiling a couple times. And she said, what do you have to fight for? Do you have a wife? Do you have kids? And I know that I know that I know. And I knew it right there in that exact moment. In that exact moment when the lady said, "Do you have a wife and do you have kids?" I knew that I knew that I knew it was the same whisper, that it was God speaking through this woman to remind me about Lori and the kids. Up until that moment, I had not thought about being married. I hadn't thought about our 4 little kids. I was 36 years old in the day of the accident. And our kids were very small. We had 4 children in little, 3.5 years because we had identical twins in the middle. So again, my kids were little, and I couldn't. If it was just up to me, I would have been gone so quick. And that's what I've wanted my whole life, was that kind of peace. And when she said, "What do you have to fight for?" God used her, spoke through her to remind me about Lori and the kids. I thought of them, and that's the reason why I stayed. That's the only reason why I chose. And I know it. I know that I know it was free will. I, I felt like he said, "If you want to live, you're gonna have to fight. It's gonna be a hard fight." And then when she prayed me back that last time, so I didn't say this yet, but Shannon, I found out later, 38-year-old woman. She was a 2-month-old baby Christian. She had been raised going to Catholic church. And when she was 18 and moved out of the house, she said, "I don't believe in God. I don't believe any of that's real. I think it's all fake. I don't want to have anything to do with it." She went on to be highly educated. Her and her husband both. They started she got married. She started a family. Now you fast forward from the time she's 18 to now she's 38. During that year, she told me later that they bought a different house. The house that they bought had thumps and bumps and what people call ghosts in her house. But if you don't believe in God, if you don't believe in the devil, if you don't believe in any spiritual realm, then how can there be thumps or bumps in the house? So it made no sense to her. Highly educated woman that doesn't believe in God or any of this stuff, but they knew that they knew that they knew. Lights are getting flipped on, lights are getting flipped off. They're hearing steps, people going up and down steps in their house, and they could feel evil presence. And it scared her, and it scared the husband. And so she went on seeker journey, I guess is the best description. And she literally even went to other countries looking at different religions. She went here, she went there, she went to the Middle East, she went to different places trying to search out and find out, okay, what it is, if their spirit realm is real. And when it was all said and done, 2 months before my accident, she told me that she got out her Bible that she was given as a child. She was reading in it, and she basically said, "Jesus, I think you're the one." And she never went back to church. This lady showed up to the scene of the accident, and all she had been doing, somebody had told her to read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So for the last 2 months before she showed up to the scene of the accident, she was reading Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I asked her what made her think that she could pray me back to life. And she said she had just read a spot in the Bible where Jesus said, "Those who believe in me do the same things I've been doing." She had read where Jesus prayed people back to life. And so she said that's why she was slapping me in the face and saying, "Come back," because Jesus said, "Speak to the mountain, speak to the problem." And she was praying and asking God to, commanding my spirit to come back in. So I came back in that last time. And again, this horrible pain. And she reminds me, what do you have to fight for? Wife and kids. And I knew I had Lori and I had the kids. And so ambulance took me to the little hospital, 20 minutes, half an hour away, whatever it was. The helicopter came back, picked me up. I was just there, 10 minutes or whatever. The helicopter came, picked me up, med flighted me to our state's biggest trauma center. The helicopter landed. So she said, "I'm not going to be with you." She kept saying, "Stay here. You got to stay here. You got to fight. You got to stay here." And so I focused on a person in the ambulance. And when they got the helicopter there, I focused on the vent at the back of he had a helmet. The guy was flying to the pilot. There was a vent this thing on the back of his helmet. And I just focused on that the whole time. And we landed on top of the roof. It's the helicopter pad on top of the roof of the hospital. And right there, it's the strangest thing on this roof. There's a big garage door. So I'm a mechanic. I've grown up in garages my whole life. And I've worked in garages my whole life. And at the top of this hospital, the last thing I would expect to see was a garage door. So there's a big roll-up garage door. And they got me on the thing, the little, gurney, whatever, the roller thing, and they opened this big garage door. And right there was a CAT scan machine, like right there. And they put it in, and there's this group of medical people, like the place is just buzzing. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people. And so I had focused on the one person in the ambulance. I'd focused on the pilot's helmet, the back of his helmet. And then there was a doctor that I focused on, and I just wanted to keep my eyes focused on somebody. He was from out of country. His name was Famito Ito, and he happened to be there that night. And I don't even know why he told me, I don't remember, but he was there at that hospital. And so him and another doctor are the two doctors, and I'm just keeping my eye on him, watching him. And there was a nurse or another medical person, whoever she was, and she kept saying, "What's your name? What's your birth date?" I knew what my name was. I knew what my birth date was, but I didn't have the strength. I couldn't speak it. I couldn't say a word. I had no strength. At this point, because of the snafu with the ambulance, because of the not calling it immediately, because of the 2 helicopter flights, it ends up from, and because it's so far away from the point the truck fell on me at approximately 6:15 p.m., it is now after 8 o'clock. It ends up, we've 2 hours have gone by, and they're doing their stuff, and they got me in, and they're taking they took the first CAT scan, and the 2 doctors are right there, right to my, as I was laying there, off to my left, and the 2 doctors got in an argument, and I mean, they were arguing pretty loud, and again, the lady kept saying, "What's your name? What's your birthday?" I couldn't say it. They started arguing very loudly, and it scared me that the doctors were arguing. I couldn't understand why they were fighting. And so then they pulled me back out of the CAT scan machine, and they turned me, and then they were putting me back in for a second round. I'm just going to stop right here and say, I was in that, like I said, I was in that hospital forever. And, so I was in trauma care, and then they want me to intensive care. And then I was on the general floor, and you get to know the nurses better. You get to know the doctors because they're the ones you spend all the time with. And this doctor, not Fumito Ito, but the other doctor, Scott, he came and visited me maybe 6 months into my stay from, trauma care where he's from. He came and visited me on the general floor. And I asked him when he came to visit me that day, at that point, I could now walk with a walker. So I was using a walker. I had 8 IVs, 4 in each arm. So I had 2 IV poles. And I said, why did you and Dr. Fumito Ito start fighting? And he said, "Oh, we weren't fighting. We were having a disagreement." And I teased him. I said, "Yeah, that's what me and my wife say when we argue in front of the kids too. Mom and Dad aren't fighting. We're just having a disagreement." And so he said, he reaches in his coat pocket, and he had a thumb drive, and he said, "I'll show you, follow me." And so I got my walker going. My wife was doing the IV poles. We went around up a little bit, and he plugged it into a computer. And what he was showing us was the CAT scan, that initial CAT scan. And he said, this was his, the doctor's words. He said, "Looking at your CAT scan," he said, "what I was looking at was the CAT scan of a dead person." He said, and he was talking about blood flows, and he had all these doctor words, but he said, he said all that stuff. And I said, "What's that mean?" He said, "It was like looking at a dead body." He said, "But the problem was your eyes were open. Your heart was pounding like you were a 20-year-old kid running a marathon. But yet, based on what we were looking at in the abdomen, that was impossible." And so he said, I had an idea why the CAT scan was lying to us, or why we were getting a false whatever. And the other doctor had a completely different idea. So they were arguing of why one thought the CAT scan said something, and the other one was arguing why he thought the CAT scan said. And the way to prove who was right was to take a different CAT scan from a different angle, and that would prove. So that's why they turned me 90 degrees, and they're putting me back in to take the second round was. But the problem was the blood they're putting in. I found out later, I'm not medical, obviously, but in the reports it said that night, just that night, once I got there, they put in 18 units. So I was told that's like 3 times what the body holds. So it's just dumping out. They're putting in, it's just dumping out. And they're putting me in. They never did get the second CAT scan done, because as the little thing was taking me back in, it was like, for me, it was like everything went dark, like when you turn a rheostat on lights, instead of a flip switch for the lights, but the turn knob for lights, and you can make them dark. Everything just started going dark, but the lights were still on. Everything started going dark, and I knew right there, I'm dying. I mean, this is it. I'm going to die. And as everything's going dark, right as everything goes dark, what they wrote in the reports was I had extremely low blood pressures, like ridiculous, crazy, crazy low. But when everything went dark, they zeroed out. So I had no blood pressure, both zeros. They said, they literally wrote bottomed out. That's what they wrote, bottomed out. So my blood pressure's dropped to 0. All these bells and whistles and all this stuff starts going off. And it's all getting dark. And now they've been saying, "What's your name? What's your birth date? What's your name? What's your birth date?" And I didn't have the strength. But when that happened, I blurred out and I yelled out, "If you don't do something right now, I am going to die." And they all stopped. They're all running around. But for one split second, everybody in that room stopped. And they looked at me in shock when I said that. And they grabbed me, they pulled me out, they went around the corner, on this gurney thing. They go around the corner, and I remember a bright light, stainless steel, and a green mask coming down. And I'm thinking like a mechanic, simple. And I'm thinking, finally, they're going to fix it. Like, you're going to do something, like fix it. And the mask came down. They ended up putting me in an induced coma for several weeks. They operated on me all week long. They had me open and they'd pack it. They had this huge incision from my ribs to my pelvic, and they'd work on it a little bit each day or whatever, and then clamp it back shut, pack it, clamp it back shut. When that initial, so they called in the head of the trauma center. So Famito Ito and Dr. Scott Pinchot, they started it. They called in the head of the trauma center. We were told later, this man, when the president of the United States would come to Wisconsin, we found out, the nurses told us this. Apparently, anytime the president goes anywhere, they will put a team of doctors, trauma doctors together. Like, say, so Madison, so that's where I got med flight to. So if the president is going to be in, southern Wisconsin, they would put together a team of trauma doctors ready to go in case anything would happen to the president. And the nurses told me later that this was the doctor, the head of the trauma center. This was the doctor that when the president came to the United States, he was the doctor so it was the best. In other words, they're saying he's the best of the best. In fact, we found out later they called him literally medical genius. So anyway, this is the doctor that gets called in from home to finish the operation. To all they did was basically sew back, pinch off the arteries, and there was all kinds of stuff left undone rather. But they worked on the arteries so that it wasn't all leaking back out. They cut out a bunch of stuff, whatever, but it was undone. And the doctor came out, and my wife, it's 2.5 hour drive. My wife is down there now, and she's there with my mom and some people. And anyway, so the doctor came out and said to my wife that the first thing he said was, in all my years of being the head of this trauma department, he said, I have never, ever seen a body so badly traumatized. Excuse me.
It's okay. It's all right. So it's a heck of a lot to go through. My goodness.
He said, I've never seen a body so badly traumatized. And the person make it alive. He said, your husband must have one hell of a will to fight. He said, but I don't expect him to live through the hour. Cross your fingers. The man told me later, when I told him about the angels, he said he was an atheist and he didn't believe in God. So he told my wife, cross your fingers. I don't expect him to live. So my wife said to him, I'm not going to cross my fingers. I'm going to pray. And the only thing she brought from our house, she never left my side for 3 weeks. I was in the coma. The only thing she brought from our house was her Bible. So she was praying. And one of the people that heard the doctor say that said, okay, if the doctor says he's not going to live through the hour, then let's thank God for every 30 minutes of life. So every 30 minutes I was alive, they got in a circle and they thank God for 30 more minutes of life. And they did it all night long. And the next morning, my wife said to the doctor, you said there's all kinds of stuff that needs to be done. Do it. Go back in and do it. And he said, we don't think he could survive any more operations right now. At this point, I'm starting to balloon up, swell up because of a massive cross injury. And they couldn't even sew me back together if they wanted to at that point because I had ballooned up so badly, the swelling. They kept me in an ice room, whatever, all this stuff was going on, my wife said. And the doctor said, I don't think he can handle it. So they waited a little bit. My wife went and told him again, look, do it. I'm giving you permission. Go in and do whatever you need to do. We're going to pray and we're going to believe God's going to do it. So he operated that like noon or 11 or whatever that was that next day. And then they clamped me. They did as much as they could that day. And then they just packed it and then clamped me. And then the next day and just on and on that. And like I said, they kept me in a induced coma for weeks. When I came out of the coma, I still had the breathing tube in. And the only thing I wanted to say was I saw angels. And even though in the ceiling, it hadn't been a big deal to me, once I was back to consciousness, all I could think of was how I saw these huge 8 feet tall angels and what they had, holding me in the middle and stuff. And I just wanted to tell them, and I didn't know that I had the breathing tube in, so I couldn't understand why I couldn't talk. And I was trying to talk, but I couldn't talk. So then they brought me a pen or a pencil. And I tried to write, I was going to try to just write the word angel. And it was so aggravating because I knew it had to start with an A, but I couldn't make the A come from my head to my fingers. I couldn't write. It was 6, 7 months before I could read. But I was so angry, I threw the writing utensil. And but as soon as they did take the breathing tube out, I remember that day my brother was there. One of my brothers were there, and the nurse. Well, first time they took the breathing tube out, I couldn't breathe, and which was really scary. So they had to re-intubate me, which was terrifying. So they took the tube out, and it was back to this, just like the last time. So they had to re-intubate me and knock me out again, and all that, it was horrible. But then the next time they tried it, and I actually could breathe. I know they waited a week or two, or whatever. But then the next time they tried it, and I could breathe, the first thing I said to everybody, I saw angels. I saw these two big angels, and they were touching me. And, right in the middle where I was crushed flat and telling everybody, angels, angels, angels. And I remember telling the doctor who said he didn't believe in God about the angels. And he said to me, because he's the smart guy, right? He's like, I'll figure out. He said, I'll figure out why you made it. And he had already told my wife at this point, he had looked up some medical, oh my goodness, I'm lost the word. Studies have been done on people and the mortality rate of the number of arteries. And based on the studies he had looked up, and he had told us which one. He said there was one done here, one done there. He said, but the biggest one, the best one, the most data, the best one was the one done at University of Southern California. And he said, based on that study, comparing your case against that study, he said, and these other ones, he said, I've searched. He said, we can't find anybody else in the world who has ever lived after having major artery severed in 5 places. He said, you're the only one. And he said, and I'm going to figure out why you lived. And when I figure that out, I'm going to use that to save other people. That's what he told us. And I said, dude, I told you, I saw the 2 angels that saved me. You're not going to figure out nothing. I remember a year later, it was actually over a year, because it was a spring, and we had a freak, here in Wisconsin, we'll have freak snowstorms when we shouldn't, when we should be getting warm weather. And it was one of those freak snowstorms. And it was that day that he called me. And I remember it was finality for him, because he called and he said, I just want you to know, it's a university hospital. And he said, we have discussed this over and over. And for the last year, we've been trying to figure this out. And I want you to know, he said, I'm done. I'm not going to try. It's inconclusive. I can't come up with a reason why you made it and didn't bleed out like you should have. So I told him, well, hey, man, I saw the angels. I know why. So again, the doctors did what they did. And one thing that, because of the truck fell on me, right in the middle, it was above my small intestines. So they removed all of my small intestines except for 2 pieces that they sewed together. It's all documented in doctor reports, and it came to, just a little over 100 centimeters. One of the 2 pieces was damaged, and the doctor said he told my wife the reason why the 100 centimeters at that point in time, I guess it's changed, but at that point in time, in 2006, now we're in 2007, I'm in the hospital over 7. And at that point in time, he said 100 centimeters, less than 100 centimeters, people often can't live. You won't be able to live, because he said we can only keep you alive on intravenous feeding so long. So they had me on intravenous feeding for several months. I lost 65 pounds from the night of the accident until whatever in the next year, March, April, whatever it was. I'd lost 65 pounds. People in my family didn't recognize me. I looked like someone directly out of a concentration camp. You could see my skull perfectly. You could see every bone in my body. I'm literally starving to death. And I'm type A. I can't hold still. I've never been able to hold still. And I was going absolutely freaking nuts in that hospital, being, stuck in there. And I started being a bad patient. And I started, I just was going crazy. And I just said, you got to let me out of here. And I remember the night, it was actually afternoon. My wife had come. She had driven down that day, and there was one of the other doctors in there. And I said, I was talking stupid, but I said, you can't keep me here. This isn't a communist country. You can't make me stay in this blankety blanket hospital forever. And I had a tube that came out, and I couldn't eat. They wouldn't let me drink. I had to fight. I mean, it would be screaming matches for ice chips. I would flip out. I needed something in my throat to make the dryness go away. And they didn't want me to have anything. And we actually had to come up with a schedule of how much I could get for ice chips, because I'd be losing my mind and screaming at them to get ice chips, and doctors didn't want me. So I'm telling the nurses, give me ice chips. They're saying, no, doctor, say you can't. So I'm like throwing fits constantly about the ice chips. My wife left her water bottle close to me once. I remember grabbing that thing and just guzzling it and literally watching it as I drank it just come right out the tube and into this plastic thing. So now the plastic thing fell up and they're always measuring that. So I'm reaching over trying to pour out the plastic thing in the sink. My wife catches me. She tells the nurse on me. I get in trouble like a little kid. But I mean, it was just this horrible, horrible experience over that year. And so it was during that time. Again, I say to this doctor, you got to let me out here. And that's because I pushed her buttons and I made her mad because I was being a jerk. I said, you can't keep me here forever. And she said, Mr. Van Natta, we're not going to keep you here forever. We can only keep you alive for another 6 to 8 months or whatever she said at the most. She said, you're going to starve to death in this hospital. And I remember yelling at her and telling her to get out of the room because nobody would see. They didn't want to talk negative. They didn't want to tell me the truth until that moment. That was the first time somebody told me the truth. And I kicked her out of the room, and somebody brought a laptop, and we started looking stuff up on the laptop. And that's the last thing you want to do is start looking up what things the reality is. And so again, doctor reports. So then one of those pieces of small intestine that were damaged, they sewed together, died. So they went in, they do an emergency surgery, and they removed the piece of intestine that died. So now I'm under the 100 centimeters. I'm, and he had said that was a magic number. And it's all, it's really cool because some skeptics, want to see my doctor reports. And I used to send them out all the time. This guy wrote this book called Insanity of Unbelief, and he wanted all my doctor reports. And he sent them away to doctor, have him look at it. And they said the best proof about this intestine thing is actually not what the doctor's report of how much it said was left, but what proves it is how much they sent to pathology. And then when you do the math, how it all works together. So either way, I'm underneath the 100 centimeters and I'm starving to death. I'm being fed intravenously. And this man from New York, we live here in Wisconsin, and this man from New York said that God woke him up at 5 a.m. 2 mornings in a row and said, fly to Wisconsin and pray for this guy and I'll do a miracle. The first day, he pretty much blew it off, told his wife, told his pastor, but he didn't do it. The next morning at 5 a.m., God woke him up again, same time, and said, buy a plane ticket, fly to Wisconsin, pray for this guy. He did. Back in 2007, he paid $900 and some dollars for that ticket, to get there quick. And so he came, this guy showed up at the hospital, prayed for me in the name of Jesus, had his palm on my forehead. And Jesus said, speak to the mountain, just like that lady at the scene of the accident. And this guy, which I was uncomfortable and that wasn't, anyway, not what I was used to, but he spoke to my intestine and he said, small intestine, I command you to go back in Jesus' name. And when he did, I felt like what came a snake, like coming uncoiled, like a hose coming uncoiled inside my stomach. I turned to the guy, Brian, on this side of the bed that had brought this other guy to the hospital. And I said that to him. It felt like something just came uncoiled inside my stomach. I immediately start gaining weight, which they said I shouldn't. I start gaining weight. They said, well, we're going to have to adjust your parental nutrition, your TPN, because you must be gaining weight, water weight. They said water retention. So we're gonna have to adjust the formula. So you're not, but then when they test my blood, I didn't have extra water and they're doing all this stuff. So then they decided to do an upper GI test. And so I had to drink this barium and they said it's going to be like a 45-minute deal, right? So I drink this barium and it was yucky and the guy is doing it. And as this radiologist is doing the thing, I hear him mutter the word mistake. And when I heard that, I don't trust anybody anyway. And when I heard that guy say mistake, I said, hey, what are you talking about mistake? If there's a mistake, mister, you better tell me. If the doctor made some kind of mistake, I want to know right now. And he's like, no. He said, just relax. He said, there's no mistake. And the doctor didn't make a mistake. He says, it's a mistake in the records. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, I could see right here. And this doctor, Michael Schur, who's the head of the trauma department, he's our best doctor, the one that would take care of the president, right? He's like, well, here at this, he called for the records. So he's looking at the records and it's saying you had this much intestine left, a little over 100 centimeters. And in this operation back in March, they took out this piece. So you have under, at that point, we know you have under 100 centimeters. He said, but I'm looking at you. And he says, you have at least half your intestines. And if the average intestine is 18 to 20 some feet, he said, that means you have, and it confused me because I'm not a metric person. And he was, switching back and forth between metric and standard. But basically said, I'm looking and said, you got half your intestines. So there must be a mistake in the records. He said, but the problem is they've gone through you so many times and they keep notating what's there. And he goes, it means he would have had to make multiple mistakes. And it doesn't make sense because this is our best guy. And so he's that. And so they made me redo the test. They made me drink the barium again. They redid the test. The senior radiologist comes in. He concurs with the other guy that I've got at least half my intestines. So what I've been told by doctors is the two big miracles of my testimony is, number one, that I went 2.5 hours or 2 hours or whatever with 5 places major arteries severed. And there's no way to put a tourniquet inside your body. And they didn't start adding blood to me until I got to that hospital, which was a long time from the point of the truck until I ended up getting to that hospital because of the whole snafu with the ambulance. So there's that. And then the second thing is literally a creative miracle where I have half my intestines. It was a difference between life or death for me. Otherwise, as the doctor said, I would have starved to death a long time ago. I'm just thinking, I'm going to stand up right now so that the people watching can see my scars. Sometimes it makes it more people. I've had people come to me after I speak at a place I speak, jails, churches, schools, wherever. And I've had people come up to me and say, BS, I don't believe it. Show me the scars. So if there's somebody out there watching thinking that today, you can, I don't know if see it very well, but basically from the bottom of my ribs, this nasty scar that they went through 5 times. I used to have a belly button. I don't have one anymore. I got this little tiny hernia. There's a big net, a big L-shaped net holding this all together. And after the guy prayed for me and the creative miracle happened, all of a sudden I had softball-sized hernias of intestines sticking through all over. So that's why they put a big net in here. And the only place that they didn't net was right here. And that's why there's one hernia. And again, none of those hernias were there until that guy prayed and half my intestines came back. And they left this part open for a access point, they said, in case they have to go back and do other surgeries. So my last operation was December something of 07. And the accident happened November of 06. So a year and whatever. We added up the days. I spent more than a year in the hospital. I can't stay in hospitals. I hate the way they smell. I hate everything about them, but I know a lot of good things happen there. But anyway, so we started Sweetbread Ministries, and I travel around wherever a door is open for me to share the testimony. I tell people what happened to me. My intention is I want people to, I want to be able to tell people my experience so that they can make a better informed decision about the spirit realm, because there's a lot of people that don't believe the spirit realm is real. Just like the lady that came and literally prayed me back to life. She spent, 18 years of her life or more, actually longer. She was 38 when she didn't believe in any of it. But then, she had this revelation, and only 2 months of that revelation, and she showed up and literally prayed me back 3 times. So again, I just share this testimony so people can make a better informed decision. I don't claim to have all the answers. I don't claim to be a perfect person. In fact, somebody asked me once, why did God save you if nobody else has lived with arteries severed in 5 places? And God right there gave me some verses out of the Bible, and the verses are found in 1 Corinthians, and it says, he chooses the weak things, the things that are not of noble birth, the lowly things, the despised things, the things that are not, so that no one may boast before him. And I just tell people, look, bottom line, he set the bar so low by saying, look, if I'd answer that knucklehead's prayers, I'll listen to anybody. So that's, again, that's why here's another thing. And I'm thinking towards the skeptic. People always have, I'm the eternal skeptic. People always have ulterior motives, right? There's always motives. So for the skeptic that might be watching, I walked away from a very lucrative business. I made a lot of money. In ministry, I'm going to tell you don't at all. It's not like that at all. I used to be able to go fix things. I'd go fix it and I would be the hero. I loved my job because I get called to jobs that nobody, I was like the specialist and fix things that other mechanics couldn't fix. And it felt great to be that guy that I get the pat on the back of like, oh, this place couldn't fix it. This couldn't fix it, but you did. And I love that. It felt great to me. I don't have that anymore. I can't do that anymore. I go and give this, and I give this testimony. I pray for people to do things. We've seen God do a lot of stuff, but I can't fix it. I can't fix people. I can't do stuff like I used to. There's not the same fix it satisfaction. There's definitely not the same, we take a small salary. So again, ulterior motives, less money, have people hassle me anonymously behind their computer or whatever, that it's not real. I mean, put up with people's junk and garbage. It's stupid. Yeah. It's literally stupid. So if anybody says, oh, he's doing it for this, that, or the money, all I can do is laugh in their face. So
Well, I want to be respectful of your time, Bruce. I know you have to leave us fairly soon because you have another commitment in just a little while. That was just extraordinary. I knew it would be. And I'd like to invite some questions. We have about 10, 15 minutes max left.
oh, yeah, actually, I've got a little more than that.
You got a little bit more than that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. My goodness, I'm not sure kind of where to start. I mean, just please, guys, bring your questions. How extraordinary that as a little kid, you became pretty disenchanted with mainline kind of religion, and you felt that, everything that was being said about Jesus because of your own pretty horrendous molestation experiences, that, how those two things just didn't kind of compute in your world. How could Jesus let something so horrific
Exactly.
happen? And it was almost like the Santa Claus. It's a story that people tell, but it doesn't hold water. It's not real.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you came from that, because one of my questions was going to be, what was your religious upbringing before this experience? So thank you for sharing that. And it's really
To be honest, I still do struggle with it sometimes.
right.
I still do struggle with it. And I think that's part of the reason why I'll go speak at a church and they don't invite me back a lot. I get one shot because they go, wait a minute, this isn't a church guy. He doesn't feel like a church guy. Did he just say a potty mouth? Did he just say a swear word? I mean, you're never going to, you drop a swear word from the front of a church, you're never
Right.
get invited back. Or I'm just a normal everyday guy. I mean, I'm just a normal guy.
Absolutely. I love that you have been a skeptic, and you bring that into your presentation, because I think that helps a lot of people who are struggling with mainline religion. It kind of makes it more authentic, because you are a skeptic. We're a skeptic for sure.
I still am a skeptic.
This extraordinary thing happened to you that was a reality. But the experience that you mentioned when you were little, as far as reaching out to Christ and asking, if you're real, kind of show me, and that you felt that sort of amazing embrace. And so while you'd become disenchanted because of your experience, there was a part of you that did have some kind of faith in this.
Yeah, and the strange thing for me is that I woke up that next morning still in that same family. I continued to have lots of bad things happen to me, and I couldn't understand if this God is real, which he was. He came and hugged me. I felt the love that I never felt my entire life before. Why do you leave me here? Like, why do you let all these bad stuff continue to happen? So for me, it made me mad at God.
Oh,
You're real, you're loving, but yet you left me here. So, that anger towards God, I've battled with my whole life.
Right. And interesting too, how Shannon, who plays such a key role, the redheaded lady in all of this, and how she was the only woman there. She was the one who was doing everything against what everybody else was doing around. She was slapping you, trying to get you back. But you stepped back and you mentioned how she had her own spiritual journey, where she struggled with mainline religion, but sort of found her own spirituality in her own way. And that had happened just a few months before the accident, and that she had sort of taken some instructions from the Bible, some teachings from the Bible, as far as then speaking to you, slapping you, and kind of following through in some of Jesus's teachings. And that's what you were hearing on the other side. So that I thought was really interesting, because the timing of that could have been completely different, but yet it was what it was. Do you stay in touch with her at all?
They moved away. They moved a couple times, and I know my wife keeps a little bit of tabs on it through Facebook. I don't have that on my phone, but so yeah. After the accident, we had her and her husband and their kids. We did a couple cookouts, and we did do a few things. And I just want to tell them thank you and get inside her head, ask her questions and stuff. She's been on different interviews from some major television shows about it, but it's been some while since I've had any contact with her. But
I love also that you told us about how some months later, maybe a year later, I don't know exactly, that you went back and you were able to identify 8 out of the 10 people who were actually there on the scene at different times. They came in slowly, etc. Of course, you were completely unconscious, I guess. They must have been absolutely floored. What sort of a reaction did you get from these people when you were able to identify them so clearly?
the same reaction that I get when I go and speak at a jail or a church or anywhere else. You have people that are an element of people that are going to believe. You got an element of people that are going to be skeptics and doubters. And then you've got people that just don't know what to think. And they're just pondering it. Mm-hmm. And which is the same. It's the standard.
Yeah, it sounds as though it's if people are ready to believe they are, if they're not, they stay where they are. It's yeah. I mean, that doesn't surprise me, but I'm sure it must have raised a few eyebrows
Oh
from
yeah.
people who were just standing there. Tell me about Leonard. Oh my goodness, your friend Leonard, who was really, I mean, completely, deer in the headlights,
Yeah.
obviously feeling completely guilty and horrible, not sure what to do. He was doing things that you didn't want him to do.
Yeah.
How is Leonard? Have you stayed in touch with him?
Not at all. Wrote
No.
him a letter, tried to reach out. He won't talk to me.
Why?
Because the insurance company got involved. He did a deposition, and anyway, he won't talk to me because of insurance company stuff and whatever. And I'm sure it's guilt. I did see him one day. I pulled up next to a stop sign. He was actually in that truck, like 3 years later,
Oh,
in that exact truck.
oh my
And I
God.
pulled up next to the truck, and I looked up into the cab, and I could see him. And he looked down. He saw me like he saw a ghost, and he went through a red light to get away from me.
Oh gosh.
So
Oh, that's really unfortunate,
it is.
obviously, because I mean, I mean, how do you feel about how he handled the situation?
I have no.
At
I
this
made
point?
my own choice to go underneath it. I saw that there was no jack stand. If I would have been smart, I would have said I'm not going underneath it. But I made the choice, so it's not even his fault.
Yeah.
Um, it's not his fault. I mean, it's just things happen. People make mistakes. I chose to go underneath it. It had been on the jack for 3 days, been running for 20 minutes. I made the choice. I went underneath it. It's I don't hold anything against him at all.
So he's the one who's really being motivated by fear, I guess, here, perhaps in terms of the insurance company being sued.
It was about being
Guilt.
sued. It was all about being sued. Yeah, and I think because there was some lies told in the deposition, and he probably felt guilty about that. Again, he's stuck in his mind between a rock and a hard place. It's his daughter and son-in-law's business. So even though he's been a family friend with me, that's just not the same as blood. So
Uh, once you guys all get to the other side, you can have a cup of coffee together and
yeah,
pack yourself on
I
back.
reached out to him. But his
Oh,
wife actually sent a card back and said, "Thank you for reaching out. He's not ready to talk to you."
right.
So
I mean, he's obviously in a great deal of turmoil.
I would
And
assume,
oh, I'm sure he is. I mean, the fact that he can't bring himself to speak to you comes from guilt and fear and all of those emotions. But I think if you can continue to be patient and reach out to him and let him know that you're okay with it, I think eventually he might be able to. And I think that'll be incredibly healing for him
maybe
because he's
it
carrying
would.
a tremendous amount,
I'm sure.
you
Yeah,
know.
but I mean, everything's good. I mean, I'm fine. I mean, so it's not.
Yeah.
Didn't turn out bad.
Right,
You know,
right.
it's,
Right.
you
But
know,
but I think if you can just hold that hand out for whenever he's ready to sort of step in and take it, I
yeah,
think that would be amazing for him and no doubt good for you as well for
yeah.
some closure. We have a question here. The man that flew from New York to pray for you, was he a minister, a healer, or any sense of why he was chosen for
Yeah,
this?
I had had a previous interaction with him while we were on vacation in New York. The pastor, my wife, I make this, I say this all the time. I started dating an atheist bartender, and I told her she was the first person I ever told of anybody that I'd been hugged by Jesus as a child because she told me God wasn't real. And I said, I know God's real. And she wore me down after 6 hours. And finally, I just admitted to her why I believe Jesus was real because of being hugged as a kid. Now, at that time of life, I was living, in the bars and whatever. So she had me, she went from atheist bartender to church lady from Saturday Night Live. If you remember that skit. And so she had me on prayer chains all over. And we had a pastor at the church that she ended up working at that moved away to New York. So after the accident, she, reached out to him and had his church praying. That's how the man had heard about me. We had gone on vacation. I had actually met the man one time before the accident on vacation. And I believe that's why God used him.
Do you stay in touch with him?
I do. Yeah, I do.
Yeah. And he just, I mean, does he do this kind of thing often? Was this a one-off that he got this
He prays
inspiration?
for people all the time. He goes to places and he prays for people all the time. And at times he sees God do some miraculous things. It He wasn't a pastor. He did work for the church
Yeah.
as a church worker, but he wasn't the pastor. But God chose him. And I think, like me, he's like a blue collar, hands on type guy like I am. And like that kind of personality type person. He rides horses or used to ride horses and stuff, just a, I'm an outdoorsman kind of guy like me.
And it was because of his presence there that your intestine grew, presumably grew back, or
Well, it's because he prayed in the name of Jesus, and when he prayed in the name of Jesus, it instantly, I felt it.
that was
It felt like touch. I say this to people that have touched electric fences. It felt like I touched an electric fence when he said in the name of Jesus, small intestine come back, and I felt like electricity that actually stung came out of his palm into my forehead, and I felt it go right through my head and into my intestines. I felt it instantly.
Yeah. And how are you health-wise today, these days?
You know, since the accident, I battled with, because of the accident, kidney stones. It's caused a recurring kidney stones from the accident. I battled with horrible diarrhea because of just having half my intestines. And they've done lots of stuff. And it's, over the last 16, 17 years or whatever it's been, I'm at a point where it's as good as it's ever going to be. I believe, and it's tolerable. I mean, there's a lot of people who struggle with diarrhea, so whatever,
Mm-hmm. We have another question. Did Shannon, the lady with red hair, share any more about what she was going through, what was going through her when she was calling you back from the light? What compelled her to remind you of your wife and kids and bring you back into your body?
Well, a couple things. I asked her why she slapped, what made her, because she was praying, commanding my spirit to come back in, because she had just read that in John 14:12. Well, Jesus said, those who believe me do the same things. And she had read, Jesus had prayed people back to life. So that was her impetus for that. But the reason for the slap, she said when she was a child, she had watched a relative drowned in a lake or somewhere. And when they took the person out, I think she said it was a grandma figure, maybe a grandma or aunt, lost it and started just smacking this kid and saying, come back, come back. And the kid spit up the water and came back. And she said she reverted back to that childhood memory. And that's why she was slapping me. So I don't know, God used it. And as far as why did she say, do you have a wife? Do you have kids? I know why, because she's a Christian at that point. God literally was speaking through her. And I recognized even laying underneath there, I knew it was the Holy Spirit speaking through her. And I knew it right there was God, because God had said, if you want to live, you're going to have to fight. It's going to be a hard fight. And she says, what do you have to fight for? Do you have a wife? Do you have kids? Instinctively, I knew right there it was God speaking.
Well, it's interesting that you seem to have a choice here. Sometimes near-death experiences are told they have to go back, or they don't have a choice. And it sounds as though there were a couple of times because you went back and you came back to your body, went back again, came back. It's almost 3 times.
Yeah, it was.
So you were given the choice, and it sounds as though ultimately your spirit chose to come back and stay back here, even though you were told that it was going to be a tough ride, a tough recovery. Tell us about when you were in the coma. You were in the coma for quite some time, I think 3 weeks. Yeah. Did you have any experiences with the other side at that point? Do you remember anything about?
Yeah, there was a couple things. I was able to tell my wife some things that had happened in the hospital outside of my room. Not in my room, outside of my room. Some conversations that have been said, an incident with a nurse, some trouble that she got in, some things that were happening that shouldn't have been happening in the hospital. And I was completely aware of and conscious of. In fact, I was at one point listening to a conversation in the parking lot, in the parking garage. There was 3 nurses in the car, and I was listening to the conversation that they were having, and they were nurses that cared for me. So yeah, that's that. Other than that, though, nothing. Just that, those things with that nurse, the one nurse getting in trouble by a supervisor, some weird things going on and all that. But that, other than that, nothing from, no, I didn't see any angels, didn't have God talk to me, nothing like that at all.
No, but I think what I'm hearing you say is during the 3 weeks that you were in coma, your spirit was out of body, and you were able to kind of eavesdrop on what was happening around and very conscious of it. And then when you came back, you were able to verbalize it. Well, that's in the near-death experience world, we see that as being veridical evidence. That's actually evidence. And it's often noted because it's so accurate. When the experiencer comes back, they tell people, you were there at such and such a time, you were wearing this and that, and it's exactly how it happened. So that's considered to be evidence. And so this is growing in quantity, and people are beginning to believe more in the phenomenon, because how could people have been able to do that with such accuracy unless they were present in spirit?
And it was actually so convincing to a certain nurse that I knew was doing illegal activities
Oof.
that when I confronted her after I came back, and I didn't do it judgmentally at all, not at all. I just, in fact, lovingly told her what I saw, and she denied it. And then I said no, and I told her why. She, it made a change in her life. I
It's
think
like,
partially because she was afraid I was going to tell somebody. And I
right.
think that's part of the reason why it made a change. But I know that I know that I don't made a change because we saw her again when I was on the regular floor. We saw her again, and I know that the life had changed already at that point
Oh,
because of some facts.
absolutely. I mean, can you imagine she's doing something she shouldn't, and somebody who's in a coma comes back and tells her what she's not doing? I mean, obviously that would make her want to fly right. And but at the same time, can you imagine what it must have done to her own belief system and maybe spirituality? Oh my goodness, how could anybody? I mean, he's the one who's caught me out, let alone any. I mean, it's really extraordinary on a number of different levels.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But yes, I mean, just know that the people who do research on these kinds of experiences collect data on the kind of what we call veridical experience. They're people who write, do a lot of research
Huh.
and would be interested in knowing that because it does go into the depository of all these facts that how could people know if there wasn't a spirit, if there wasn't consciousness, if there wasn't, an afterlife? How could we possibly? There's got to be more than the here and now,
Right.
basically, more than just the physical body. Um, do you? Oh, I love that. I love that you saw these amazing beings, these angels. That makes your story very, very special. They were 8 foot, very muscular,
Awesome.
long hair, didn't say anything. And clearly, you've mentioned the two miracles. One is being alive for at least 2.5 hours with five major arteries being severed. I mean,
I have to be very cautious how I said that. Somebody's looked at my stuff and they said it's 5 places.
five
It's
places, right?
three major arteries,
Five.
5 places.
Okay,
Just
five.
to be clear.
But yeah, five. Thank you. Five places, though,
Yeah.
right, where you were bleeding out, and people bleed out with just maybe one or two. You've
Just
got
one.
five going
Yeah.
for 2.5 hours, and yet you're still here to tell the story. And of course, the angels. Your doctor gave up trying to understand how it is that you're still alive because there is no logical reason for it. But you know very well that you saw these beings, so clearly they must have been keeping that system alive. They must have been keeping your circulatory system alive.
That's the only thing I can think of. And back to that doctor, when he was interviewed by History Channel, they did this show called Miracles Decoded. You used to be able to go online and look it up. It didn't play in the United States market, but it did play in Canada and 60 other countries. And it was about, they lied to us. It was about actually disproving miracles. But they told us at the front it was going to be about showcasing the miracles. But once we signed the once we signed the release, then they told us the truth. Actually, we're going to try and disprove your story. Well, they did 24 miracles from around the world, 8 episodes, 3 miracles per one, and they discounted each one. But when they got to mine, they saved it for the last episode, finale one, and they basically said that it was more, they let the viewer make the choice, but they had some, smart guys with letters in front and back of their name say that he couldn't have seen angels because there's no such thing as angels, and he couldn't have talked to God because there's no such thing as God. But when they did the medical, they're like, there's no explanation. Medically, there's no explanation. So they couldn't. So that's why they saved it for the last one.
Right,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And that doctor, when he was interviewed, he said he's no longer atheist. He's now agnostic. He knew that was the first case he had ever been involved in where he said he knew that he knew that he knew there was a higher power, but he wasn't going to try and guess who the higher power was. He just says, I know there's a higher power. And this had been, 6, 7, 8 years after the accident when they interviewed him. And he said, since that time, there's been a couple other cases where he knew that he knew there was something else going on other than him.
Right. One of our questions is, are you able to connect? Have you been able to connect with those angels after the accident?
I've never seen those angels again. No.
Never seen those angels again. Okay. Um, okay.
Nope.
But obviously you believe in them, and
Oh, yeah.
in
Yeah.
the spiritual world, when you were
Yeah.
up there the first time, for certain, you were disconnected from your body. I mean, you didn't really have any compassion, didn't kind of know what was going on necessarily. Right. It was somebody else, but you felt that angels are very much part of that realm, and what they were doing was really not that unusual.
Right. That's the weird thing. It seemed so normal until I came back and I got taken out of the coma. And that was all I wanted to talk about was seeing those two angels.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, the angels would just make it so much more special. It's already a very special story. After coming back, do the beings from the other side continue to communicate with you? I mean, is there anything? Do you find yourself being able to go back to that state of peace that you had when you were first on the
I
scene?
wish. No, no,
No.
I've never.
Not
I've the Bible talks about a word, the peace. A verse that says peace that surpasses mental understanding. That's what I experienced. It was peace that doesn't even make sense. It was so much peace. I can't even describe it.
Right. What after effects have you experienced since the accident? Obviously, there are some physiological after effects, but in terms of spiritual, I mean, clearly you run a wonderful ministry now, and we have
Yeah.
just a couple of minutes. Can you speak a little bit to the work that you do in prisons and schools and
Yeah,
how that? Yeah.
we've built some orphanages. We continue to support orphanages monthly. We got 2 different orphanages that we support monthly. We're not the sole support for them, but one of the, I guess, major supporters for them. We again speak at different places. I just go wherever the door is open for me to share this testimony, and we pray for people. And sometimes we see God do stuff, and sometimes apparently nothing happens to our visible eyes, but we believe that when we pray, God moves and He answers for our best. So I just continue to go out and again, my main reason is I just want to let people know what I experienced instead of hiding it. When I speak at a church of 100 people, I done some studies of what you guys do just a little bit, and I found the percentages. Based on the percentages, if there's 100 people in the room, there should be 2 or 3 other people that have had an experience like mine. And I used to say, raise your hand if you had out-of-body experience, if you're not embarrassed about it. And I would inevitably get 2, 3, 4 other people, 5 other people that raise their hand in a room of, let's say approximately 100. So I know what's out there. And sometimes people come up and share their out-of-body experiences with me that they don't tell anybody because they're embarrassed or they don't want people to think they're crazy. But after the service, after I speak, they'll come up and whisper in my ear and say, oh, I had this stroke or I had this heart attack or this, whatever. And they tell me their experiences. And that's been very impactful for me.
So what is your philosophy of life now? What is your religious belief, your philosophical belief after this experience?
The same belief that I had at 5 years old, that Jesus is real and He loves us, despite all the bad things. He doesn't always take the bad things away, but He says He never leaves us, never forsakes us, that He's real, that there is a heaven, there's a hell. The stories that impacted me the most for out-of-body experiences aren't the Christian stories, because I'm an eternal skeptic. And I think about, that preconceived notion idea, that whole thing. The ones that grab me the most are there's 3 of them that are burned in my memory forever, of atheists, hardcore atheists who died and went to hell and then come back and said, you know what? I didn't believe this. I was a person fighting against it my whole life. I was a person saying, no, it's a bunch of BS. But then they come back and they're like, it's real. That when somebody has a life change like that, to me, it's like, it's more impactful than the Christian who comes back and says, yeah, I saw what I believed was going to be there in the first place. When the person comes back and says, I changed my belief, I now believe something completely different based on what I experienced. To me, it's like, aha, skeptic in me goes, that makes it real. That makes it real.
Yeah. How do you deal with the opposition? How do you deal with the skeptics that come out of the wood?
Because I'm a skeptic, I get it. It's hard not to take it personal. Probably maybe I've got low self-esteem issues from childhood abuse, whatever, but it's hard not to take that stuff personal. I get mad. Sometimes when I read comments, I'll be like vicious and go back, and my wife will be like, don't send that. No, no, no. Don't reply to that person. Don't send. I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm sending it. I mean, because I'll lose my temper and get mad at these people and accuse me like, oh, it's about money. It's like, you're so stupid. You don't even know what you're talking about. I mean, I got a temper still. I mean, I still got plenty of issues. It's hard to deal with. I'm a skeptic, so I understand it. But on the other hand, I also know what I lived, and I know it's true.
Yeah. Do you, and this is a funny question, but are you grateful for the experience, or how do you feel about what happened to you?
I have to be honest and tell you, it was a horrible year in the hospital. It was horrible in rehab, learning to walk again and all this stuff. It was horrible. I didn't have workman's comp. We lost everything financially except our house. That's the only thing we got to keep. I thought I was bulletproof. I'd raced motorcycles for 10 years. I'm never going to get hurt. I don't need workman's comp for myself, but obviously I did. And I had always been a workaholic. We had a lot of money saved up. We lost everything, literally everything except the house. And so there was a lot of negative, but I have to say that even though there's been all that negative, I can look at all the positive that's happened since. I mentioned before the interview yesterday, I spoke at a place, an hour away from here. And before I got up to speak, I've been in that area, a handful of times in the last however many years. Before I got up to speak, they had different people get up and share what God had done in their life, answered prayers, or a lady who had been completely healed from rheumatoid arthritis after being like doctor saying you're going to be crippled from this for the rest of your life, being completely healed from it. Just different testimonies of things that happened when we'd been in that area before. And I shared my testimony, prayed for people, and they had me crying so hard that by the time I got to speak, I'm like, thanks a lot, you guys. You had to say all this stuff before I get to speak and wreck me. But so it is impactful to hear their testimony and other people's, how it's impacted them. People that have actually changed their life, how God completely changed their life because of hearing it.
Yeah.
I just recently, this is a good one. I just recently heard. So there was a lady that heard my testimony in Florida. I was down at this church in Florida, shared it. Somebody died. They're dead. And this lady remembered my story and prayed this person back to life, slapping them. And that person came back. I just heard this one, like a month or two ago. I was like, oh, sweet. That's a good one. I've heard other people who have lost like this one son of a guy that I know, when his dad died, because he remembers me being on the ceiling. When the dad's heart stopped, he was talking to his dad and saying, Dad, I know you're here somewhere. I'm going to tell you bye, whatever. So just different things that people say, that it's good to see what God has done, besides the healings, besides the miraculous that we've seen God do, this stuff on the inside, on the inside.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, my friend, you truly are a walking miracle. You truly are. And bless you for all the work, all the wonderful work that you're doing. And
all the questions answered. We good?
That's it. Well, hold on. One quick question, because he has to go.
Question. So, did you ever? Well, two questions. So, what denomination, what faith or branch of Christianity do you call yourself now? And do you see any differences between those different faiths?
Oh, there's a million different faiths. I've actually got a book here that says all the different denominations. Funny thing is, I don't read any of those words in the Bible. I don't see Lutheran in the Bible. I don't see Catholic in the Bible. So when somebody says, what's my faith? I believe in Jesus. I still am disenfranchised with the big religious picture and all that. I wish there weren't all those denominations. I wish that wasn't. I'm just a Christian. I'm just a guy that wants to believe I do believe what the Bible says, and just call myself Christian and believe in Jesus. That's it. So I wouldn't claim any of those words or denominations. And not that it's each their own. Everybody feels, different denominations operate with God differently, the way they feel comfortable. And I guess I tell people, go wherever you feel comfortable, but make sure it's a place that believes in the whole Bible. I don't know.
And what is your guidance telling you about the next several years? What do you plan to do? More of the same? Are you wanting to do something different?
I'm going to continue to do this exact same thing until God takes me. Mm-hmm. There's 8 people in the Bible that were raised from the dead other than Jesus. And I start my thing a lot of times when I talk, I say, has anybody ever met one of those 8 people? And they always say no. I'm like, that's right, because the miracle doesn't last. My miracle's not going to last. I'm going to die. And so it'll be gone. But there is one miracle that lasts forever, I think, and that's when somebody receives Jesus as Lord and Savior so they can spend eternity in heaven. The 3 people that died and went to hell that are burned in my memory, all 3 of those, the only reason in the end it was Jesus. That was the only reason why they ended up in a different place, Jesus. That's it.
Well, thank you so very much again. I'll let you go because I know you have another engagement, but it's been really, really interesting. What an incredible, incredible journey and experience you've had. And I can't thank you enough for your time this afternoon.
Thank you again for allowing me to share.
Indeed, indeed. Take care of yourself. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
God bless.
God bless you. Bye-bye.